Hello and welcome to the video, Navigating Triggers in the Moment. This may be some of the hardest, most advanced work that I know. And so I hope you watch, if not rewatch, the Navigating Difficult Situation webinars, read my book, Turn the Tide, keep talking with folks, and really bring your wonders, dilemmas, real situations to our Q&As. I am still learning, and I've been working on this probably 25 years. And recently found myself feeling triggered and not very present and not very effective, and talk about humbling. And so here's what we're going to do. When you're triggered, when someone else is triggered, what do you do? And I want to start with when other folks are triggered, but we'll get to you pretty quickly, or us. So when you notice someone is feeling triggered, you wonder, you can just move in, especially when you're centered, and just say, can you say more? And then listen very deeply, acknowledge what they're saying, maybe paraphrase back. They need to feel heard. You want to deeply understand where they are, and then you'll probably get some ideas where to go next. But when someone is having an unexpected wave of emotion knocked off their game, they're set off, just losing their cool. That's how I phrased myself the other day. Feeling heard and acknowledged. Now, they could be way off base, and because it could have been they just did something that was ineffective, but until they're heard, they won't be able to de-escalate enough to engage in dialogue and get some learning and be useful in the room. So when you notice a participant seems triggered, you saw these in the facilitating packet. These are some of my favorite. I'm noticing you're speaking with a lot of energy. Now, that's if you've tried the say more and that's not working, because that could just be enough, and then engage them. But I'm wondering if you're feeling triggered right now, because they may be so triggered they just cannot come out of it, even a smidgen, to be present enough to engage. And so you might need to say something like, this response is unusual for you. Is there something else going on? These kind of process the process. I know that's jargon, but it may take it up another level to help the room as well as this person see, oh yeah, something did happen, either a thought in me, a memory, or something in the room that was a trigger for me. And then we can slow down, maybe talk about that, as opposed to reacting necessarily to folks and triggered reactions. That might be useful, but if somebody's triggered and not making thoughtful choices, then their energy may be a trigger for others, and it can escalate to quite 4, 5, 10 people in the room, shutting down, fighting, fleeing, fighting. Notice I said fighting twice, because that's usually what happens. So for what it's worth, these are some strategies that I use. Now, again, if the person's triggered, they might be responding out of cumulative impact. And like we said in a recent video, these could work, because you may not want to use the word trigger. You may not want to call attention to the fact they're talking with larger, more increased emotion than they were a few minutes ago. But you might say, I can see you've got a strong reaction to what was just said. Can you say more? Or if you don't know what the comment was, I see you've got a strong reaction. Can you say either what happened now or what it was connected to? And that could be another way to get them to talk and to give you more information to see where you want to go. One of my go-tos is, my guess is this is something that's happened to you a lot, or you've seen pretty frequently. And that acknowledges the cumulative impact. And usually people then, yeah, this is something that happens to folks in our marginalized group all the time. And then I might say, I have seen it too. Can you say more? Do you want to say more? Again, always leaving them with the option to share or not. And usually as people are sharing, I want to, as I mentioned in the previous video, acknowledge I hear the pain or I hear the frustration. And is there anything else we can do today to be supportive? And I say, do you want us to listen more? Do you want other people to come in to realize that they see this too? Sometimes I ask that question. Sometimes I'll just bring other folks in. But I do think there's something about, is there anything we can do to be supportive today? Now, all of that requires that you're pretty centered, maybe mildly triggered, but you are really grounded. And so if you notice you're a bit off center, and I mean just a bit, and you notice maybe moderate, grounding in positive intentions. I'm here to be useful. I want to be of service. And clearly, You do not want to puke your triggered emotions, reactions on others. Now, you may not know you're triggered, and so you may be working out your issues on others, or you may be frustrated or angry or scared, and you're reacting out of that. You can always come back and own it and apologize and explore it further. But if you can ground in, this is not about me, this is about hearing others. How can I center this individual or the group needs above my own? It's not that I'm stuffing things, but unconsciously, if I'm not aware and I'm triggered, I'm often working my issues out on others, and I have that crossing a line when we're in the facilitator role. Our needs do not trump those of the participants. Not saying we can't work all of our needs, but if I'm only working my issues and what happened to me 20 years ago or what I'm angry about that has really nothing to do with this moment or little to do, that's when I think it's inappropriate and we cross a line. So getting recentered in how can I be useful in this moment? What's going on for me? How can I support others? Any of that might get you de-escalated just enough to be a little more present. And I often, when I'm mildly to moderately triggered, I need time to center. So there are some design strategies you can do. You don't have to let people know you're triggered. You say, this is an important moment. What if everyone takes a moment and just journals, writes down 2 or 3 things they're thinking about or what they're feeling? They can turn to a partner and then talk about that. You can also have them just turn to someone and what are you noticing in the moment? What's going on for you? So either journal then talk or just talk, or if they just say if you want to quietly reflect, but if you'd like to talk to somebody. But it's in those moments that then you can do something intentionally to get a little more centered. If you are co-facilitating in those moments, turn to your co-facilitator and ask them to come over and just say, I am feeling triggered. Can you ask me some questions or can you take this from here? But you'll have a couple minutes. And so as you're breathing, everyone take a deep breath. They can ask you some questions about, well, what do you think, step 1, the stimulus was, but more importantly, what's underneath it? Do you have a sense what got triggered? I felt deeply triggered recently and I realized I did not respond the way I really know I can and have in the past. And it was actually just this morning I got in touch with a new source of trigger for me, which is I don't like being accused of things I don't believe I did. And I don't know the root of that yet, so I don't know if it comes from childhood or where it comes from. But I got in touch with this is a new source of, I unconsciously hit this root, didn't know it was a root, never thought of it before, and reacted with, mild to moderate triggered reactions, and I wasn't as present to the moment. So I've been doing this 25, 30 years, and I am still finding new roots, and I'm going to be digging in this one for a while. And so having a co-facilitator ask what's going on. Now, I wasn't able when I was feeling triggered. Even if someone had asked, I probably couldn't have found this root. It took several days of reflection and working on it and trying to figure out what's going on to find it. And so the facilitator can say, well, how about what story did you make up about people? And then you can really say it, and then they can maybe give you another story, and that might help you go, oh, okay, from that perspective, I can then have empathy, connect with. It could be you had some mind chatter. Then, why can't these people get it? We just talked about this. I don't get what's going on. So one of mine is often I'm impatient. And so instead of being in that story of impatience, some key step for changing the mind chatter for me is, this may be new to folks. It took me 3, 4, 10 times to learn this skill. All right, this may be the first time they heard this. And I may not be meeting them where they are. I could be trying to teach calculus and they're wanting new math or early algebra. So, all right, what's going on in the room? What are the skills that are needed? What's the knowledge that's needed? I may be overshooting where they are. This is more about me. How do I redesign in the moment? Any and all of that gets me more understanding, get focused on what's the learning that needs to happen, maybe not what I think needs to happen. Now, these are just few of the strategies that you can see in the other materials, and then on the calls, we can really dig in. As folks show up authentic and say, this just happened, I reacted this way, I can be doing live coaching and maybe support you finding, as I did very recently, what might be some new roots, some reasons you reacted, and then At least for me, that gives me a whole new avenue to do inner healing so that the next time I'm not caught off guard and I'm like, oh, there it is again. I'm feeling unjustly accused. That's probably not what they're doing, but that's what I'm feeling. So how can I be present in this moment to be useful? Now, one other way, quick design idea. If you always carry 3x5 cards or have copy paper that you can, rip up into smaller pieces, halves or thirds, then you can say, here's a piece of paper, here's what I'd like. Can people just write down what you're noticing or what you're feeling, what you think we need to do to move forward? Fold it up, let's trade it 5 times. Let's read them into the room so we don't know necessarily who asked for what, but it might get a temperature check of where we are. And that could give the whole group an idea, or you can just collect them up and say, we're about to go to break. When we come back, I want to have a chance to talk more about where we are and what's going on. But I'd like you to give me some insights about where you think you are, where the group is, and how you'd like to move forward. And that'll give me some time over break to think about how to move forward. Any and all of that can give you time to recenter. Even if you did a break and half an hour ago, you can say, we're just going to take a quick one function break. You can get time to recenter, especially if you don't have anybody there. Okay, take a deep breath. Now, you can also talk about if you're feeling triggered. The key is to make it about you and not about what anyone else said or did. So I notice I'm feeling a bit triggered. I'm wondering if you are, if others are. You can say, I'm feeling a bit triggered now. That's a trigger word for me. What I notice is my heart is beating. I'm not as clearly thinking, and I need a few deep breaths. So do y'all mind breathing with me? And then doing that as a group might help other folk. And that might give you a chance to then talk about, when someone said this, it's not about you. It's much more about me. This is what it reminded me of. And I noticed that I generated lots more emotion and I couldn't think clearly in the moment. The third one, sometimes I've done, I need us to stop because there's some group dynamics I'd like us to go into. I'd like to talk about what just happened. I noticed I'm feeling a bit of frustration and I'd like to talk about why. Now, there's a difference between owning what you're feeling, puking it on others, and then going after somebody. And what can be very useful is to say, in this room, we were talking about sexual assault, and I could be wrong, but I thought I saw 2 people that identified as male turning to each other and talking while someone who identifies female was talking about sexual assault in the university and on campus. And so that was a hot button for me as I realized I experienced some sexual assault, never told anybody. And the silence of this level of violence is also heavy in my heart. And I don't know why 2 men talk to each other. In the moment, I made up a story that helped me be triggered, but I realized they may have not heard what was going on. So I just want to slow down because my guess is other folks might have been impacted, and let's just see what's going on. And then I might go to impact and intent that we talked about before. I've never really said this one, but this last one is really my intention to know that this probably has much more to do with me and why I have re-triggered some old roots or current cumulative impact. And what happened in the moment might be useful to talk about. But if I say I'm feeling triggered, my energy may have more to do with what's going on for me, but I'd like to talk about what's just going on. Again, these are pretty moderate to higher risk interventions, and yet when a group is having 1 or more people triggered and we've negotiated that we're going to talk and stop about it, as a facilitator, we can hold the space and acknowledge what's going on, at least for us and or the group, and then see where we want to go. Again, it's about owning your part, helping the group learn and grow, and not you just did this, coming out of judgment and wanting to put the person in their place. We have to be clear what our intentions are. Now, a few times you may have had experience where you've tried some of this and the conflict continues to escalate, or someone was talking and someone felt triggered and they said something and the other person felt triggered, then 5 more people, and you have a room of folks, including you, that are just kind of popping all over the place. And sometimes I have done I was about to do this, vroom, but I think that what that means is we need to stop and just call it and to slow down. I might say, I'm noticing we're talking faster. I'm noticing we're talking over each other, or I could be wrong, but I think 3 or 4 of the things were just said might have been hard to hear or been a trigger for people. I think a number of people in the room are feeling triggered. I just need us to stop. And someone will keep trying. Please, I just need us to slow down. We're going to talk about this, but in order to be effective, for us to hear each other, I really want us to just slow down, take a deep breath. Because when there are multiple people in the room that have a lot they want to say, and they're often full of emotion, it's going to be hard to hear. And so I'm going to actually do a little more gatekeeping. And the first thing I'd like us to do, because I really want everyone to be heard, feel heard, because I know there's going to be a lot of good learning in this. And to do that, I want to just reground in our community guidelines. And so you may want to pull them out. You may want to pop them back on the screen. You may want to do some of those other tools we talked about earlier to get you some time to reground, but just say, we can be in our feelings, but I also just want to get us centered a bit so we can be thoughtful in how we respond. And so just take a moment, write down all you're feeling, what were the behaviors that might have been triggers for you, and just see why they might have been triggers in these moments. Give people a few minutes. And so I'd like us to reflect on what we want to say before we say it. And I'm just going to be calling on folks, and then we may go down a path for a while, and we may come back and call in someone else who has a different path they want to go down. And we may be here for a while. Because I really want to explore all the different multiple perspectives and really try to have understanding. May not agree, but understand why people are feeling the way they are, why they said what they did. There might be some unintended impact. We're just going to have to unpack this for a while. And so everybody take a deep breath. So for me, that takes a lot of skill and groundedness. And that's when there's frustration with each other, or people are hurt or embarrassed or scared. But when people are then angry with me, disappointed in me, something I did, it's much more difficult to do. And there are a couple situations where I have facilitated those moments effectively, I thought, and some where I did not do as much as all I could do. I kept feeling more triggered, and I was not with the co-facilitator, because in those moments, if it turns out someone has frustrations about you and you're part of the dynamic, it's another great reason to be co-facilitating, unless it's about both of you all. But that's when the co-facilitator could come in. And what I would do is would sit down to visually say, I'm not holding this process anymore. I'm part of the process. And so I'm a participant. And I'll follow the co-facilitator's lead, because clearly something I did had an impact on others. And I'm open to exploring that. Now, that's, again, harder to do when you're by yourself. But when you realize that your behavior had an impact you didn't intend, negative impact, and no one has told you yet, you can say, I have a sense or a wonder, it seems that what I just said had an impact on you or others. I'm open to hearing about the impact. Again, I have to be really centered to do this. And when I'm unaware and caught off guard, I am more likely to be defensive, or more likely to not have my full set of tools. Recently, I was caught off guard. I was able to do tell me more, help me understand. Then at a later date, people were willing to keep the conversation going. Times in the room I've been able to do, I apologize, I really regret the impact I had when I did that or said that, or when I didn't do that. I really hear your disappointment, your anger. Is there any more you want to say? I'm open to hearing more about the impact. Any and all of that might be useful. If the person doesn't want to, you can say, I'm open to hearing if you want to talk about break, because I can understand you may not want to do it in a large group. um, I just want to support your learning and the learning of the group. Excuse me. And again, I apologize. And what I intend to do is keep digging at this, chewing on it, seeing why I chose to do what I did in the moment, thinking about all of our group memberships and just understanding the impact on you. Because if I've done it here, I may have done it someplace else and may do it in the future. And I do not want to, and I intend to keep working so that I can learn new skills. And I'll work with folks who are my colleagues and similar privileged identities just to help me figure out how I can be more effective in the future. Now, any and all of that may be useful. And in the moment, the folks that have felt impacted by your behaviors may not be ready to go, all right, I accept your apology, or all right, and de-escalate enough, hearing you own it and really be willing to hear the impact so they can talk about it. Because I know that my behavior in the moment may be one of many times they've experienced something different. So I'm moving, I'm impacting them, getting to cumulative impact. Talking about that in the moment may or may not be useful. And if someone feels heard, then I say my guess is other folks have a reaction to my behavior. There might be others that were impacted, and or someone might say, what happened, what you did, Kathy, is what happens all the time. And so the group moves to cumulative impact. And then I might say, I get that, I get that. And I see that I contributed to that. What's it like? Or anybody else want to talk about when you've experienced it other places, so that we move to the group level. And then all of us may be learning about what we could be doing to minimize those in the future, and or just hear the impact. Often folks in marginalized identities, again, it might depend on their Myers-Briggs. Some folks just want to be heard and acknowledged and have people there sitting with them. Acknowledge when they've done something like that in the past, talk about what they might do differently. I know for me personally, when someone else's behaviors impacted me, I want them to acknowledge it, and I want them to talk about what they're going to do differently. I personally don't need them to talk a lot about their feelings in the moment and feeling disappointed themselves or sad or frustrated themselves. They did that. Guilt and shame. I don't find that, for me, what I want. What I want in the moment is a commitment to not do it anymore, now with me or in the future with me and others, and that I trust that they're serious about wanting to change. Now, I'm not everybody, and so you may want to make sure that there's a variety of options, and having people hear the impact, talk about how they're feeling based on the impact, also talk about what they want to do differently or how they don't want to show up like that again. So you really cover both of those maybe. And there might be something else someone needs. I don't know. And that's where you're asking, what else would be helpful in this moment? Is there anything left unfinished? Any comments you'd like to make that you're holding on to? Any of that, without pointing to people specifically, could have people share what they need. So there's not a right, wrong. Folks have different needs based on some of those nonviolent communication needs. You may remember some of that material from the Triggers work, Marshall Rosenberg, NVC. And to realize that people have different needs. It doesn't mean they're right or wrong. You're right or wrong if you can't meet them. But asking what else might be useful, is there anything undone, anything else people want to say, they might find some other things they weren't aware of, expectations they had, hopes they had. I don't know. This isn't about judgment or blame or punishment. This is about engaged, authentic conversation when folks have felt impacted by behavior. And people may or may not have recognized they felt triggered in the moment until we start talking about it. They may or may not be ready to do their own work around what was their trigger. They may never do it in front of you or with you. You may still represent a moment that they're not willing to let go of. Or able to let go of because it is so deep, and they need to do that kind of healing work, not with you. And so I often feel unfinished when my behavior has had a negative impact on others. And so part of that is us developing the capacity to feel unfinished and uncomfortable, and you may not have things working out, and that person may not ever want to talk to you again. And so how do you keep learning? You talk about what you intend to do differently, and your amends, your learning has to be very present, visible as you move on. I'm not saying you run back to the person and say, here's all I've been doing. And yet if they ask, what are you learning and what have you been doing differently? You can let them know. Or what's been the impact on you? You say, I've been learning, growing. Here's some things I'm trying. I don't know if they're useful, but I continue to commit to learning and growing. And I do not ever want to have the impact I did on you and others. And this is what I'm trying to do. And still, there may not be resolution. The person still may be angry, hurt, disappointed, and they may not be open to further conversation, but you can always offer and say, if you'd like to have further conversation now or in the future, I'm open, and I will do my best to show up effective and support you, support me, and keep learning together. This relationship is important to me, or I just want to support you and sharing with me. If there's any new information you get later, if you'd like to share to me, I'm open to that. So I know I've been putting out a number of things. They may not all be useful to you. You may not want them, and yet you may want to just be reflecting on how to have these available to you, because each situation, again, may be different based on what you did or said, the impact you had, cumulative impact, what's going on with the person, what their unmet needs are in the moment. And any and all of that could be so under the surface, we'll never know. There are some people that have stayed in dialogue and wanted to keep talking when my behavior impacted them, and I've been so grateful for that, because I do value relationship. I don't want folks negatively impacted by what I do. And I want to keep learning, and it's not on them to teach me. And I have a few times been able to keep in the relationship, often been with people I already had a relationship with, who wanted to keep investing in the relationship, and I was very grateful for that gift, and I took it very seriously and did my work. And we can do all the work in the world, and there will be times that other folks will feel impacted by our behavior. And so how do we prepare, have the tools and skills and the presence to try to show up the best we can, and then offer to keep in dialogue? Now, I want to talk a bit about step 4, spinning. So if someone engages you around your behavior, most likely, if you're like me, you'll make up a story at step 3 about it might be their fault, or if they've only said it differently, or how come they did it now, and then to quickly interrupt that and say, all right, this is where we are. How can I be useful and supportive? And again, say all this to yourself so you get a little more centered, and then can you say more? Do you want to talk about the impact? I apologize. I had no idea that behavior impacted you. I'm open to a conversation, whatever it is. But while you're doing that, you'll probably get into step 4, spinning. Judging yourself, blaming yourself. How could I have done this? Blaming them. And we have to interrupt those quickly in the moment so we're present. If you really can't be present, you might be able to say, I really want to have this conversation. What I'm noticing right now is I'm spinning. Would you be open to taking a break and coming back to this? And I commit to go doing some work so I can come back and be present. Then you may want to go talk to somebody. You may want to do some writing, that journaling sheet, to find out what's going on in you. And even if you show up in that moment, people share with you what they were frustrated or disappointed about, you own it, you apologize, you commit to doing more work. What I notice in me and what I hear in other people is, even with some moment of, okay, when I'm done with the workshop, I quickly will spin back and I shoulda, woulda, coulda. And I think that keeps me from doing my self-work. And so if I'm in blame and shame and or get back into judgment of the person, I'm not doing my work. And maybe they could have said things differently. Maybe they are so deeply in their own triggered work their own triggers. They couldn't show up effectively either, but I have to take responsibility for me. And so what I have found, especially recently, if I was like, okay, that happened. It is what it is. What am I supposed to be learning here? Everything happens for a reason. Now, I took days saying this stuff, and I, with my emotions and present with those, I just really had to keep changing my story about the person at step 3 and at step 4 with those subsequent thoughts, lots of emotional breathing and stress release, working out. And then what am I supposed to be learning? What's the lesson here for me? How can I change my behaviors in the future? And as I told you this morning, I got insight to a root I never knew I had. And so just keep digging and say, why did I respond in that way? Why did I react so quickly? Why didn't I use some of the tools I know I have, but in that moment I didn't? What was going on for me? And just keep looking at my part of the street. And anytime I start looking at their side of the street, this is a 12-step tool. Anytime I start thinking about what are they doing, and then I just need to change my behavior and just keep focusing on me. As I get new insights, I can share them with other people that I believe can help me keep going deeper. And when I feel centered and grounded that my intention is to be teaching and learning, I can share that publicly. I can always go back to the person and say, I've got some new insights about behaviors and what I wish I'd done differently. And I don't expect you to hear me. And if you are willing, I'm open to continue a conversation, because you may have also gotten some new insights about what I said or did that impact you, and I'm open to hearing those as well. And they might be done, and or you may never see them again. So part of the doing my part and making amends is sharing what I'm learning with others who are in similar group identities, as well as I'm doing on this, in places where I'm teaching, hoping that I learn and show up better the next time. Part of white culture, as you know, is perfectionism. And when we expect ourselves to be perfect, we may trigger ourselves when we say and do things that have a negative impact on others. And then I might move into defensiveness or fragility or react out of old issues, as opposed to working hard to be present and hearing and listening and engaging effectively. And so I need to let go of perfectionism. The truth is, I'm going to a workshop, I think on Sunday, 2 days from now. So I could say and do something easily that has an impact on others in similar privileged groups, corresponding marginalized, similar marginalized. Folks bring all of themselves to workshops, and sometimes their triggers is about what I did. Sometimes it's partly about what I did and more about what's going on for them, but they may not have the tools in the moment or ever to deal. So how do we as facilitators keep deepening our capacity to be present with people when they feel triggered, and particularly if they feel triggered when it's been our behavior that has been the step 1, the circumstance for them, the stimulus. Very advanced skills, for me at least. And many times I'm useful, and sometimes I'm not able to be present in the moment, and I say and do things I later regret. And I can always go back and offer for more conversation, and some people will say no. So then I need to keep changing my behavior, keep digging, and then show up differently. That's my amends to the world. All right, take a deep breath. Whew. So we've been talking about navigating triggers in the moment. There are so many more tools, strategies, moments we can talk about. So I really want to encourage you. You may want a couple times watch the Navigating Difficult Situation webinars, especially after you've had a moment where you did not respond as effectively as you now realize you could have. Use the workbooks, use the handouts to keep digging. And I'm going to offer some homework this week. I think it's a few times you didn't react very effectively, and to use that triggering event journaling handout you used last week. Just kind of dig in and see what else you can learn about you. And then please bring all your what ifs to the open Q&A calls. That's where we can do some open coaching. And if you've got the courage and willingness and vulnerability and bravery, I guarantee you'll be helping others in the moment and as they listen. So I really invite you to show up in this learning community so we all can learn how to better navigate ourselves, navigate dynamics when others are triggered. We got to learn this together. All right. See you in the next video.